Hi, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of AC Milan Podcast. It's me, Devapam, along with Rajat and Sam, back with our episode three. Three is a very important number. Milan has played three matches so far, won three. So far, the only team which has managed to do that. Maybe Napoli or Inter will join. But at this point in time, as we speak, as we record this, Milan are on top of Serie A. Milan also knows its three opponents from the Champions League, and each one of those opponents have a story intertwined with one of Milan's current or ex footballers. So we'll do a deep dive into that. Probably this is the mother of all a group of deaths. We have heard about group of deaths, seen group of deaths, but probably this is the mother of all. And then we will talk about finally the transfer season ended yesterday. Milan did some business on the last closing day, which was a pretty surprising thing. We haven't had significant surprises on the last closing days since probably I think Bonaventura came. And finally, we will talk about a little bit about our expectation for the season. So that's basically our agenda. Let's dive right into the season so far. Rajat, Milan's 3 wins in 3 matches so far. How do you see it?
Oh, very nicely put introduction there, Devapam. I think it's been an incredible start to the season for Milan. We were all a little worried, a bit pensive about Milan's start because the friendlies hadn't gone well. Milan had, I think, just managed to win one friendly. So we were not really anticipating a good start to the season, and we were all really surprised at how Milan have come out firing all cylinders, right from the start. 9 points out of 9 at the top of the table, perfectly placed to play the derby after the international break. I think what's been extremely surprising, apart from the performances, is the acclimatization of the new signings. They've all hit the ground running. Pulisic could have scored 3 out of 3 if not for Rui Patricio's miracle save yesterday. He's been quite the man on fire on the right wing. And Milan's so almost fancy signing of Samuel Chukwueze stays grounded on the bench right now because Pulisic has basically made the right wing his own. Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who we all had concerns about, has basically transformed into this freight train that's wrecking right through oppositions. When he's in his stride, he's unstoppable. Reindeers, for the third game running, has been clocking the maximum distance, and he looks like he's ready to go right after the final whistle. So all these three players have bedded in very, very well. Krunic is deputizing superbly as a defensive midfielder at the base of midfield. What's remarkable is Liao has popped up in bits and pieces. Of course, there was this fantastic goal he scored at the Olympico yesterday, but he's coming in and out of games, and yet Milan seem to be dominating. Milan seem to be unpredictable in attack. There are various avenues through which Milan can score goals. Penalties have become a new favorite way of scoring as well over the last couple of games. So I think Milan have entered the season in the right way. I think Milan go into the game against Inter with the right amount of confidence. Of course, if Fiorentina can do Milan a favor and puncture Inter's confidence tomorrow night, that would be wonderful. But there are obviously some negatives. The defense looks shaky. Tomori continues to be careless, reckless, a little immature when he's trying to defend his post. He's trying to mark his man. He tends to make some really bad decisions. Milan don't seem to have somebody to step in his absence. And it's very worrying that Milan are going to go face Inter without Tomori. Kalulu has also been inconsistent, so I'm a little surprised that this particular position wasn't addressed in the summer market. But as long as Milan is playing on the front foot, I think we take an attack first approach and we figure out our defense as it goes.
Well, yeah. I was also fairly surprised that Liao took that change of his jersey number to being 10 and actually making his movements like a 10. I mean, he was like Kaka all over the place. He was right wing, left wing. He was tackling inside the Milan penalty box. That was refreshing, and if he can take that next level up in terms of movement and in terms of his shooting accuracy, we are looking at a player who would easily provide 20 goals and 20 assists in a season. So he is that player for us. Sam, what do you make of Milan's performance so far?
Largely want to echo what Raj has said about and you as well with Rafael. I think the Ruben Loftus-Cheek looking like Franz Beckenbauer every time he gets the ball into the second half of the pitch is just unbelievable at the moment. I want to see him against Inter and see how they sort of accommodate for him and see how they respond for his physicality. And I think when we're in the Champions League, playing against like PSG and Borussia Dortmund and Newcastle, that impact is going to be lessened just by virtue of playing against more athletic teams. But watching him against Bologna and Torino and Roma yesterday was like a bowling ball. He's extraordinary to watch at times. And you couple that with the other signings that have also, like Raj said, have acclimatized incredibly well. Pulisic already making us all look a little bit foolish, talking about the longevity, the injury problems, the lack of versatility, the lack of goal production. He seems to have taken to Serie A incredibly well. But the thing that really stands out to me is the fact that not only have the new signs acclimatized, the players that were there originally seems to have taken a step forward. Rafael and Theo Hernandez is in the conversation for the best left wing in European football. It's certainly the best left side in Serie A. And that combination has already paid dividends. The goal against Torino, the goal against Roma, several chances where Rafael could have had a goal that overlapping and rotating and swapping each other. It's a joy to watch. The sort of movement that Milan have been capable of in stretching out their opposition, it's harking to sort of Premier League sides. It's not really something I've seen recently for Milan, to be honest with you. We've played typically such static football. Even in the 4-2-3-1 during the title win, it was not this kind of level of movement and sort of frantic positioning and stuff like that. And we are playing on the front foot and we are putting teams under pressure. And yesterday against Roma, Milan just looked faster and stronger and better coached and with better stamina and more physical. And I want to shout out as well. I saw Matteo Benetti putting it up today. Keeping Rade Krunic is going to be considered one of the best signings of the summer, alongside Pulisic and Chukwueze and the other players that have come in. Keeping him as the base of that while we wait for Benacer, and then being able to accommodate Benacer when he comes back, knowing that Krunic isn't letting anybody down, is a really big thing. I think in terms of the way that Milan have looked, specifically in this 4-3-3. Having those two midfielders either side of Krunic, being able to push forward, put additional pressure, has given Milan a different dynamic and almost like a more kaleidoscopic kind of offensive approach that is really putting teams under pressure. And against teams like Torino and Bologna, it's just way too much to deal with. And then it exposes teams that are one-dimensional like Roma and struggle defensively as Roma did yesterday. I think it's given them a lot of avenues to be sort of really, really positive moving forward. RLC reminiscent of the sort of physicality that Kessie brought in his 2-year peak when he was at Milan, that driving forward and light runs into the box and stuff. Watching him at the moment is a joy. I'm obviously tentative to talk about Milan in the long term after the 3 games that we've had. it's two good games that you'd have expected Milan to win, and then a Roma side that clearly seems to be poorly coached at the moment under Jose Mourinho. Inter's the big test. But at the moment, it appears that Milan have established themselves alongside Napoli and Inter as one of the three teams that should be going for a Scudetto over the course of this season.
Yeah, I mean, the most striking thing for me was, I mean, the quality of all our intakes has been far higher than what we have managed to buy in the last 3-4 years. So the only question that I had, the only doubt that I had was, would Pioli be able to weave them into a collection? How soon would this team start combining and performing as a team? Because we are playing this entire season with 3 members in our midfield who have never played with each other. A complete new midfield. We are playing with a new formation itself. So even the old timers, a Liao or a Giroud or a Theo, they would have to change some of their movements to adjust to the new system. And without going into the merits or demerits of the two tactical systems, what is very noticeable is that every member is able to perform the right way in this current system. Not that they would not be able to perform in that 4-2-3-1, but somehow it's all clicking together, and it's very pleasant as a Milan fan that they could do it after a pretty lackadaisical pre-season where we managed only 1 goal from open play. Now, I mean, every time that the team pushes forward, we are expecting them to create something. That goal that Liao and Theo together manufactured Torino, it's amazing. The goals have come from everywhere, not just from the penalties. The penalties are all stone cold penalties, which have been given because of the ferociousness of the attack that Milan has possessed. It's not only Liao. Penalties have come because of RLC. Penalties have come because everybody has been involved. So it's amazing. And then that goal of Liao yesterday against Roma. Sam, what do you make of that one?
So I think the position that Milan have put themselves in over the last couple of games is you're right. I agree with you about that. There was a lackadaisical preseason where we were, especially with the end of the transfer window and stuff. There was like a sense of tentativeness about the way that this was going to start going into the season. When the way that Milan played against Roma specifically was swatting away of a potential rival with the kind of ease that I hadn't necessarily expected. Milan have been in this sort of position before where they've looked good against the Bolognas and the Torinos and the Genoas of the world, and then they come against a team that's like 80 or 70% of the quality, and the game becomes a bogged down stalemate sort of difficult game. This, aside from the red card that gave Roma a bit of license to start pushing forward, Milan were utterly dominant in this game. Utterly dominant, make no bones about it. The first half, there was a joke amongst the commentators that the only save Maignan had to make was when Tomori headed the ball back to him, and that was by the 45 or 50 minute mark, and it was absolutely true. Without using this opportunity to dump on Roma, because that's not what I'm trying to do here. I was more emphasizing the gap between Milan, Inter, and Napoli, I think, and the Romas and the Lazios of the world at the moment. That gap is fairly evident. Watching that Roma midfield try and deal with Reinders and Ruben Loftus-Cheek was really surprising, in the sense of the gap in that physicality and then the pace that Milan were able to play with pretty much on the front foot until that red card. I think Roma have got some serious issues to have to navigate, but obviously this is a Milan podcast, so we'll focus on the Milan element of it. I'd like to see them against, obviously, Inter and Juventus moving forward before I make any sort of claims, but the game against Roma should show that really there are 16 teams in Serie A that Milan should beat fairly comfortably, home and away, unless something horrendous goes wrong. That's my first take from that first three, because the quality gap appears to be that large right now.
Yes, just adding to what Sam said, right? I think Pioli had built Milan to be more of a counter-attacking team, which is when we saw them perform at their best even in Europe. In their first season, in their second season, Milan were a lot more effective when they were counter-attacking rather than being a possession-based team. And right now we can see that pace being unleashed when Milan have the ball and they're countering. You can literally see the opposition quaking in their boots, and there's so much pace all across. There's so much directness with the ball that didn't exist before. Pace existed, but the directness has now come in through the midfield as well, with the likes of Ruben Loftus-Cheek. And Milan are exceptionally good at also trying to break down a deeper block, a deeper defense. And Milan have played against teams in the last 3 matches who've adopted that style, and Milan were able to comfortably move the ball around and find those tiny openings and crevices in the defense to make their way into the box. So it's very refreshing to see Milan play this way. And additionally, how surreal and fulfilling is it to see Chukwueze and Noah Okafor come onto the pitch with Pulisic and Giroud coming off the pitch. We used to have Salamakers and Messias come off barely a few months ago. And this is transformational for Milan. And although we're yet to see, the captivating, flashy signing of Chukwueze really dance his way around Syria defenses, and I'm sure we will see it soon. We saw a glimpse of what Okafor can bring to the team in last night's game. His trickery, his space, his ability to sort of fool defenses with a small turn and a drop of the shoulder. So there's so much to be excited about. Of course, we have Luka Jovic, who's also joined us in the last days. So we might have an additional body in the box who can hopefully contribute to the overall goal tally. But yes, this is very, very exciting times for Milan.
Yeah. I do owe an apology to Christian Pulisic. I thought, I had made a kind of a prediction that, probably that would not work out basis his past work. But I think that commentary gem from Mauro Suma, where he says, USA, 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 USA.
Come on, baby. Come on, baby.
Come on, baby. So I think that equals the best of what Tiziano Crudeli would have ever said for Kaka or Seedorf. But I echo Mauro Suma now. I think Pulisic is one of the best in his positions. Maybe if he can just stay injury free. I was thinking that he would not have that pace after all those injuries to rattle, but Serie A is a pretty not such a fast league overall. I don't think the wing backs would have that much pace. Maybe when we play our derby, we will find out more about it. A derby will be a proper metrics to say how far we have come, or how much we have changed, and whether this team is actually like we have lost like 4 derbies this year, 4 or 5 derbies this year. Lost count of it, and it's always painful. We can't lose the next one.
I think it's slightly early to really call out weaknesses, but I think this team is obviously designed to outscore the opposition, not to shut it out. When Milan have been put under pressure, Milan have looked a bit shaky. This happened against even the previous 2 opponents. It's just that their finishing was terrible. They weren't able to make the most of their half chances. But, I think Milan have done something to try and aid the defense in a way. We remember that Pioli had mentioned he wanted his fullbacks to sort of double up as central midfielders, which we saw with Calabria also. Was dropping into midfield, playing alongside Krunic in the game against Roma, which is essentially supposed to be another layer of protection against potential counterattacks. But I do feel against better opposition, Milan will be exposed a lot more. Chow is very, very young. There is a little bit of naivety in his game, although with Tomori, it's been a lot more evident. I am reiterating this. I am somewhat disappointed that that was not addressed, and hopefully this does not come to bite us in the backside when we play against much stronger opposition, and the Champions League kind of does set the stage for that. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting segue if you want to start talking about the group stage of the Champions League.
Before we start that, I'll probably just make one more prediction. If next season we can sell Tomori maybe for 70 or 80 million, that's the going rate right now in EPL for defenders, right? So if somebody pays 70 or 80 million for Tomori, and if CDK's money also comes through, that's around the 20 million, that's 100 million in there. I think we'll be able to, upgrade the striker, the right back, and every other position that we are thinking about. So maybe Tomori can be the person who we can sacrifice. But
we should probably start making a shortlist based on Chelsea's squad at the moment. We can probably go and pick someone up from there.
Okay. So that brings us to the UEFA UCL draw, and boy, oh boy, I've seen a few groups of death, like in World Cups also there have been some groups of death. Milan, when they came back to Champions League first year, that was also a group of death. Porto was there. I think Atletico Madrid was there. But this one is, boy, oh boy. You could never expect that Tonali will be coming back and playing on 19th in San Siro. You would never expect that for the first time Donnarumma will have to come play in San Siro. You'll have to face the entire Milan. He is honestly, he chickened out when he was playing for Italy and Milan fans were heckling him. Now he has to come and play for PSG in San Siro. And finally, Christian Pulisic will have to go back to Dortmund. So I know it's a doom and gloom. Any silver lining, Sam, anywhere?
Oh God. I actually think that this, outside of Newcastle, but I would have been much more afraid of PSG and Borussia Dortmund 1 or 2 years ago if Jude Bellingham or Erling Haaland was still in that squad. I can't pretend to be a Bundesliga expert, so I can't necessarily speak to who am I going to be afraid of on the Borussia Dortmund lineup this season necessarily. The thing about Dortmund is that they tend to be like 11 to 15 blokes that are like on Football Manager, and then they're like second in the Bundesliga after like 25 games, and you wonder how it's happened every year. The thing about PSG as well is that that's a significantly weaker side on paper. Without Neymar, without there's several others, with the Mbappe thing lingering over the team. This is not the PSG of Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe that was 2 years ago. That I'm like, let's just hope that we don't get beaten 6-0. We're not in that circumstance. I think Borussia Dortmund is a peer of Milan in terms of that second tier of elite European clubs. I think that we should be confident to get a result at home. Playing in Germany is going to be really tough. And then with Newcastle, they're a well-coached side with lots of talent, of which Sandro Tonali is one of. But that midfield in general, with Sandro Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes, that full-back combination of Kieran Trippier at right back, they've got Isak up front. That's a really, really solid side. I think they're a year or two away from being like a really dangerous English football club. They remind me a little bit of when Manchester City started buying like Robinho and that in sort of 2008, sort of 2009, they bought Gareth Barry and James Milner, and they like had like a solid Premier League side, and they were starting to cherry pick some really good players, but they hadn't quite turned into like anywhere near a juggernaut. But Eddie Howe's going to have that team really well prepared, especially going away at San Siro. They're really solid in that respect. I think I feel better about the group than I did when Milan first got into the Champions League, and it was Chelsea and Atletico Madrid, and that I knew going in we were competing for third place at that moment. But this one, I actually feel that we can beat Dortmund and Newcastle at home. I think we can get a draw in one of the games against Paris Saint-Germain if we play very, very well. Although watching, as Raj points out, watching some of the shakiness of the back line, the prospect of Kylian Mbappe being chased around by Tomori brings hives, to be honest with you, in terms of how stressed that makes me considering. But other than that, I think Milan have enough firepower now and enough depth where they can comfortably say that we are aiming for second, and we shouldn't consider ourselves inferior to Borussia Dortmund and Newcastle. I remember recently there was Inter were in a group with Dortmund and Barcelona. It was like 2 or 3 years ago. Barca still had Messi. Dortmund had Haaland, and I think a few other some of the young star players at that point. I think Sancho was still playing for that Dortmund side at that time. I would have taken this group over that group in that year, personally. I think Milan have a chance. And maybe I'm buoyed by the 3 weeks of good football that I've seen from the Rossoneri, but I think there's a realistic chance of progression this year. And I'm not just like hoping not to be embarrassed as I have been in recent years, especially when we first.
Rajat, last year's UCL group had Benfica, Juventus, Maccabi Haifa, and PSG. And somehow Benfica managed to remain, winless. I mean, they drew both the matches with PSG and managed 4 wins in the other 4 matches. And they topped PSG. Of course, this time the other 2 teams are equally powerful. What do you see? I mean, what is the? By the way, Milan has never played Newcastle in any European competition. Milan has played PSG 4 times. Twice they have won. Twice they have drawn. Milan have also played Dortmund 4 times. Twice Milan has won. 1 time there was a draw, and 1 time Dortmund won it. But the last time Milan played Dortmund was in 2002, 2003. The last time Milan played PSG was even earlier, 2000, 2001. So, football has changed. The clubs have changed. These are not those clubs. Where do you see Milan's chance?
Yeah, I think you concluded your question perfectly. A lot has changed in the last couple of months. I think PSG right now are struggling. Sam touched upon it. They have about 9 to 10 new signings this season, and they are struggling to gel. As a matter of fact, I would have liked to have played PSG right at the start. Milan played PSG in round 3 and round 4, which is what worries me. Because if you look at that PSG squad now, I think Luis Campos has been given a lot of free rein to build that squad, and he's built it superbly. I think on paper they have, alongside Manchester City, the strongest squad anywhere in Europe. And some of the young guns that they have signed this season, right from start to the finish, right, rather from the defense to attack, they are stacked with talent. And what's important is it's a balanced squad right now. So it's not, Neymar, Messi, and Mbappe, but they have players at every position who can wreak havoc. And it's only a matter of time before Luis Enrique, who is going to do a much better job than the previous manager did. I expect Luis Enrique to bring about more quality, more change in the squad as they begin to play well together. So I'm very, very worried about PSG. I wouldn't be so dismissive about them, and I'm extremely worried that we play them later on. I think we begin with Newcastle, and I share Sam's opinion about Newcastle probably not being ready for this stage. I don't think they strengthen the squad enough to be a Champions League squad. And we've seen how Newcastle have played in the last few games as well. Yes, they blew Villa out of the park in the first game of the season, but they were played off the park by City. Darwin Núñez sent them home crying in the third game, and as we speak right now, they're playing against Brighton, and we can see how they perform against Brighton. So Newcastle don't look like they're built to play against the better teams with any level of proficiency or quality. So I expect us to get 6 points against them. As far as Dortmund's concerned, they are officially the chokers of European football. Like at this point in time, I don't know how else to sort of tag them. They had a golden opportunity to win the Bundesliga last year, and they dropped the ball on the final day of the season. They were leading 2-0 against Heidenheim, which is newly promoted team in the Bundesliga today. They were leading 2-0 and they conceded 2 goals at home against Heidenheim, and they drew that game. So Dortmund's very capable of checking out early in a game. So I expect Milan to do very well against Dortmund too. And I will echo Sam's prediction. I think Milan can finish second, could even win this group. So while this group looks tantalizing and delicious on paper, I think the way Milan's built equips them to progress from here. And Scoloni had predicted it. He wanted Milan to be a European team. And I think Milan have increasingly become a European team over the last couple of seasons.
One thing you have to also take into account is that Milan also plays all its top rivals within the first 10 rounds, which means that there will be a section where Milan will play Juventus, midweek PSG, and then next week Napoli, something like that. So there will be very tough matches all throughout, and we just do not know if Milan can manage both the competitions. Having said that, I absolutely agree that PSG is probably still not settled. Although by the time we meet them, they might be. Newcastle, like you said, have not probably built for 2 competitions, but then historically we struggle against EPL sides because of their superior speed. But now Milan is playing a little bit more. Milan has players who plays with more speed, and Newcastle may come. Newcastle may have to play Milan too soon. Their start has not been that good. Dortmund, I would say we can get 6 points from Dortmund. So that's there. If I have to, these are like positive, things. If I have to look at it from a different angle, then I say, okay, let's give it a good go in the first 3 rounds. If not, let's quietly play it out so that we repeat the performance of 2 years back, finish 4th, get the 2nd star. Okay, and that's my silver lining. We'll not be able to win the UCL this year, that's for sure, guys. Well, maybe we will reach second round if we suddenly we are against Man City. If we reach second round, it will be probably as a second team. So we'll probably face somebody like a Real Madrid or a Man City or something. Okay.
Where's your sense of romance, Stepapan? Where's your sense of romance, man? This is so
I want to take it step by
cynical.
step. Let's get the 2nd star before those cousins of ours. Okay. Let's do that. And then, build another strong, like sell Tomori, get a few more defenders, get Jonathan David instead of Giroud. And then next year, let's kill PSG in Paris. Okay. So anyway,
this fits the timeline the management also has, right? They wanted to win the Champions League within 5 years of entering the competition. So what the Palm is expecting still fits within the 5-year narrative. So if you can win the Champions League next year, it's in that 5-year window.
We had some good last day deals. We bought Luka Jovic from Fiorentina for a 1-year loan, I think. Then we managed to offload Origi and his wages. We also managed to offload Fode Ballo-Touré. The only guy who's still here is Caldara, and maybe even Caldara can be, sent out because there are still some leagues which are still open for transfer, like Turkey and all. So who knows, they might place Caldara there. So apart from Caldara, I think there are none of the players who have questionable talent or performance from last year who have remained in the club. So we have managed to offload Alexis Salemakers, Junior Messias, Brahim Diaz, Fode Ballo-Touré, Divock Origi, Ante Rebic, all of those, Tataru Sanu, so all of those who were questionable. Now let me come to Rajat, you and Sam. Maybe I'll come to Sam first. On the outgoing side, it's probably, 9 out of 10. Okay. What about the incoming side?
I think, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I was brimming with optimism. The market was great. We were addressing needs and bringing in some solid players and things like that. And then the last week and a half has been just a shit show, to excuse my language. Just the last fortnight has just been dreadful. So that really dropped the grade down for me. I would have given it sort of a 9 going in, and I thought the Taremi signing would have been the final piece of just a brilliant month in August that Milan have had, where they not only have they got an affordable striker who scored over 40 goals in the last 2 seasons, they've got him for a reasonable price. He wants to join. He was pushing his agents, whoever they may be, that he wanted to come over to the team, and he was going to be integrated. And it's brilliant. We don't have to depend on a bloke who can be taking out his pension rather than starting up from Milan 3 times a week. And I was really, really excited about that. And then obviously they dropped the ball in some of the most inconceivable news articles I've read in my life in terms of the way that was handled. The club were talking to the wrong agent. The club were talking to the wrong guy. We were talking about it for 2 months. They didn't agree on they agreed on a fee in a personal terms with completely different representation, and then intermediaries changed the offer, and then everyone got confused, and it all sort of fell apart near the end. It's astonishing that we live in the 21st century that can actually happen, where intermediaries that aren't actually connected to the person in general, to the striker in general, can actually influence the transfer in this way, to a point where you hoodwink what I was starting to think of 2 of the more sharp and smart officials in Serie A in terms of player acquisition. Then the idea of pivoting to Rafa Mir, who scored 6 goals last season, as if that's going to move the needle, and then to finally settle on Jovic, who fantastic, was a brilliant signing on FIFA 19. But other than that, what are we doing here? And it's just smacked of desperation. I would have actually much rather, and I'll say this now, and Jovic will score 10 goals by January, but I would have rather that they didn't sign anybody after the Taremi thing, took a deep breath, waited to the end of the transfer window, and then scouted ahead in January and chased somebody else. You've already got Okafor. You could have kept Colombo. You didn't need to have him go, because he was going on the idea that we're bringing in some replacement. You could have told Galliani to hold off, and we'll sort it out in January. You've got a good relationship with the club, obviously. That could have worked. And you sort of go into January, even the following June, saying, all right, let's actually look at this properly, rather than getting to 6 hours before the end of the transfer window and just Googling striker available by the sounds of things, and just finding whoever Transfer Market suggested or whoever Twitter wanted. It was just, some of the names were just astonishing. They put a bid in for Sasa Kalajic, who's played about 20 minutes for Wolves in the last 2 years, scored a goal that bounced off his back against Everton, told the interview he didn't even know that it hit him on the way through, and that was supposed to be our saviour as one of the options. That should tell you.
He was tall. He was a tall guy. He's a tall guy.
He is tall. I can't deny that he's tall. And it was just that was the signifier of how bare the cupboards were after Taremi, that we're like, You know, when you come home late at night and you haven't done the shopping and you're like, okay, so there's like 2 eggs and there's some leftover noodles and there's some random seasoning from Christmas. And it's just, you sort of just putting things together and hoping for the best. That's what it felt like we were doing in the last week of, and the annoying thing is, as I said 2 weeks ago, we've known for 18 months that stroke has been a problem. We've known Giroud's age, like the blonde highlights aren't fooling anybody. That guy's nearly 40 years old. Like, we know that this is a problem that we needed to fix. We know that Okafor is recovering from a long-term injury. A best case scenario is a depth signing right now. This has been a need. And then on top of that, we were offering to pay him 1.5 million. Origi's getting paid 5.1. You're telling me you can't spring 3 million to get a proven Champions League level scorer in the squad? It just, the whole thing was a mess. And it really put a nasty stain on what had been a really, really great month following the Tonali stuff. That last week, it's like a B+ now for me. It's like an 8 out of 10, a 7.5. And that's a shame.
Rajat, Taremi deal soured it for you also?
I think they did remarkably well to bring down the offer, or rather the expectation, from 25 to 30 million, which is when they were trying to negotiate with him a couple of months ago. They brought it down to 15 million plus 3 in bonuses, which I still think was kind of overpaying for a 31-year-old whose contract's expiring in 12 months. But you've got to pay for quality, and he was possibly one of the only available strikers who brought a degree of assurance. It was a calamitous mess at the end of it. But what was also messy, like Sam mentioned, was the names they were chasing. It felt like there was no direction. The Wolves striker, when we begin to try and pronounce his name, was someone Milan had pursued 2 years ago. He's
Sasha
a blast from
Kaladze.
the past. Yes. So it was someone that Milan, when he was at Stuttgart, if I'm not mistaken, Milan had tried to acquire him then, but Milan did not proceed with that. But then they went after Patson Daka and Rafa Mir, who are poles apart in terms of how they play. And it just felt like they're throwing a body into the mix rather than someone they can expect a certain output from. So I think ultimately, in my personal opinion, having seen Jovic play, albeit 5 years ago for a very terrific Frankfurt side, I believe in the guy. I think he can be very, very good. If he even replicates the output that he showed with Fiorentina, that's a bonus. He fits the profile of the number 9 that Pioli likes to play with in this system. So I'm going to look at it on the positive side. I'm not obviously thrilled. I mean, it's a massive drop-off from Mehdi Taremi, of course. But we have Jovic, and I think Jovic comes in as a replacement for Origi rather than for Colombo. We did need a second striker who could do something, who could add some value on the pitch, because Giroud was not going to clock all those minutes. And I don't think Colombo was truly ready. I mean, yes, we all got to see the goals he scored last season, but his goal scoring rate was quite appalling, frankly. So I don't think Colombo could have deputized for Giroud. We did need somebody instead of Giroud. Is Jovic going to be that player? Let's see. But yes, it did take the sheen off what has been a phenomenal transfer month for us, or a couple of months. I was going to give it a 9 to 9.5 if we ended up with Taremi and a centre-back. I don't think Taremi would have been enough. I've been tooting this horn and blasting this drum, or banging this drum, about needing a centre-back for quite a while now. Milan went and signed a kid from Argentina who I barely think will get minutes on the training pitch, let alone on in the league or in the Champions League. But I mean, I hope this doesn't come to bite Milan at the backside. I would probably round this off at an 8. Could have ended at maybe an 8.5 if Taremi had joined, but it's just an 8 at the moment.
For me, the thing that stood out was that Milan was planning to hijack Taremi at the end of the season if he had not gone to any other club at roughly half of what Porto was asking in June or July, which was a good plan. But in the transfer season, you always have a plan B, you have a plan C, and then you have a plan D. If you do not get your plan A, then plan B comes in. Now, absolutely amazing to hear some of the stories, and I don't know which one is true, which one is not. That they offered 1.5 to Taremi to come from Porto. I mean, did they really expect Taremi just because he's an Iranian? He's coming. Uh, that they will offer him this much. I don't know. I mean, that's racist. I don't know. 1.5 million, where Tatarusan was getting probably 1.2. So I don't think that was the right value. Let's say that that's an incorrect value. Probably Milan offered 3. And then there was another news that it was basically the wrong set of agents that they were talking to. How difficult is it in these days sitting and asking for the right agents? It was said that Milan had already agreed personal terms with Taremi, which means that they would have already agreed everything. And then finally, the other thing that came out was that a set of agents very close to Porto, they started asking for a lot of commissions, agent commissions, and that is when it broke down. Now again, I mean, if that was the case, you should have already started talking with your option 2, option 3, option 4. It happened like, for 3 days, we were on tenterhooks that Taremi was coming. And again, Taremi is not a world beater, but he's one of those, profiles that we feel could have supplanted Giroud, given Milan another 1 or 2 years to truly identify a 20 or a 25 goal striker and young striker and buy him. So Taremi would have, done that. I don't know how successful he would have been. Maybe he would not have been successful in Serie A. Not many strikers are. But then they started looking for everyone. They bid for Yusuf and Neseri. They bid for Sasha Kaladzic. They bid for Rafa Mir. They bid for Patson Daka. All of these are very good players. But is that the profile that you are looking for? Is it just a tall guy, just like Giroud, who can play in the target man position, holding position? Again, ultimately we went for Luka Jovic, but his agent Ramadani had been touting Jovic to Milan for entire June and August, and somehow it was not planned. I feel that the inexperience of the management team came out on those final 2-3 days. So even though they manage a 9 out of 10 on the outgoing list, I would still overall give them a 7 out of 10. So we needed a CDM. Hopefully they will rectify these in January, and we'll see how it goes. But having seen this kind of a transfer, also having seen this kind of a UCL group stage, and also the 3 rounds of play that has happened, what is your fair expectation of Milan's season?
I predicted Milan to finish in the top 4. I still think they will finish in the top 4. I feel Napoli will win their second title. I think this is something I had predicted in the first episode as well, on the second episode of the podcast. So I feel Napoli have been playing particularly well. I think Inter are a domestically built side. They will do really well. I still see Milan finishing in the top 3 in Serie A. Had Taremi joined, maybe probably edged and gone into the second position and fought really hard for the first one. That said, I wouldn't be surprised if Milan actually end up winning the league, because it's so close between those 3 sides. I think Milan can reach the quarterfinals, even if they finish second in the group and they don't draw Manchester City. I think they can still go ahead and qualify to the quarterfinals, and then it depends on how the draw plays out. I feel Milan can beat most of these big named clubs because they're all in a mess, bar Manchester City. And as far as the Coppa Italia is concerned, Milan will have to prioritize. I don't think the squad, even now, is built for 3 competitions. Pioli is going to prioritize Serie A and the UCL over the Coppa Italia. So I think we'll probably go up till the semi-finals, and then we'll throw in the towel there and focus on the other 2 competitions.
Yeah. If I just, before I go to Sam, if I just run the rules over our other domestic, opponents, almost all of them had a positive transfer spend. So they spent less than what they sold. Teams like Inter and Roma, they did business not in the supermarket but in a moms and pops kind of thing. So even on the last day that they were getting players, they were getting players for free. Davy Klaassen for free, Marcus Thuram for free. It's a free a club that gets only
Rather surprising that they pretty much shopped like that and still recorded the most expensive transfer of the league in the summer with Benjamin Pavard.
So while Milan went with players of a certain quality, which would cost like 15-20 million, they went with either a very high or a very low, a 0 or a 40 and a 30. By the way, I did predict on the Roma thing in our first episode that Roma will crash and burn and Mourinho will be out of his job by December. Looks like I may have hit the nail on that one. But Sam, coming back to Milan, where do you see us come June or May next year?
I think third is my initial feeling, and I made that prediction. I'm going to stick with that a couple of weeks ago. I think Inter have firmly established themselves as the best team on paper in Italy, and Napoli have had a solid start against Frosinone and Sassuolo, I believe. But the game tonight will be interesting to see how they fare against Lazio. But I think the way that Milan have built themselves, have established themselves as a team that's capable of winning the title. I think there are certain conditions that would need to be met for that to take place, and I think one of them is over the course of the season addressing some of the issues that you pointed out with the centre back depth, with the central defensive midfielder depth, possibly another striker. I think those have to be addressed in January if we're going to get through that gauntlet of Champions League fixtures alongside tough ones coming out of that. I can't see a world where there aren't at least enough injuries to make that a really awkward situation for Milan to have to deal with, especially if Giroud gets a knock. He's so important at the moment to that team without a real replacement. Obviously, we'll see how Jovic gets on, but I'm not entirely convinced that that's going to be a permanent solution. So I think Inter are the best team on paper. I think Pavard is a brilliant signing for them. I also think that Marcus Thuram has already started to look pretty good with his relationship with Lautaro Martinez as well. So that's a really dangerous situation. The prospect of the Milan defense chasing those guys around twice this season is worrying. You couple that with Napoli that have retained a lot of their talent, although I still don't think Rudy Garcia is the kind of coach that can really close a league title. I just want to see it, is all I'm saying. Which I think leaves Milan with a good season. We'll be second, with what I expect will be third, and there's an outside bet at a title run, but a couple of conditions need to be met alongside a slight decline of some of their close rivals. In terms of the Champions League situation, I think they can get second, and I agree with Raj that as long as it's a non-Manchester City, but I'd also like to add Bayern Munich. I don't want Bayern Munich in there either. And I think European football's
Barcelona and Real Madrid both have had very good seasons.
That's true. The Barcelona getting João Felix and Cancelo on the same day was borderline unfair, really, wasn't it? And they've got a 16-year-old kid that's already being compared to Messi's already in the Spain squad. How do they keep doing this? I don't want to talk about it. But the point I'm trying to make is that the outside of the Barcelona, Bayern Munich, Manchester City triumvirate, maybe Real Madrid on a good day finishes Tunis healthy. I think they can see themselves playing against a litany of some of these opponents in the second round and have a decent shot over 2 legs. Beyond that, though, when it gets to those quarterfinals, we're one of 8 truly elite sides in the Champions League at that point. I don't consider us favourites at all. But I would absolutely take third, a decent cup run, and a not embarrassing UCL experience this year. Regroup in summer and start pushing forward.
Yeah, I mean, probably a moderate expectation from my side would be, I think I had put Juventus as a probable winner in our first episode because they were going to play only the league. But I think Milan can change that. I mean, if not this year, then when? You have got everything. Pioli has got everything that he wanted. He retained people that he wanted to retain. He let go of people that he wanted to let go. There has not been a single transfer in or out that has not been as per his wish. So if not the second star now, then when? And like I said, that the UCL groups composition gives Pioli a very good excuse to focus on Serie A and win this, and establish kind of a dominance that next year we will go into the pot 1 and we'll get better teams in our group and we will have a better ride. Having said that, I do feel that Inter are still slightly stronger than us. I hate to say that. I really hate to say that. But still, I would put Milan as number 1 if Milan goes out of UCL groups. If Milan manage to qualify for the second round, maybe it's a toss-up between Milan and Inter. But we'll be covering whatever happens in the AC Milan podcast. And we'll come back with a new episode in a couple of weeks again. Hopefully, finger crossed, Mike Mainan doesn't get injured in this international trip, and we get a derby win, for first derby win of 2023. That's the last wish that we have from this episode. Hope you liked it. Thank you all.